college's aim in building Cohen Quad had many aspects to it. At its most fundamental, you could say that the college needed more room. Exeter College has been on its Turl Street site since 1315, and an awful lot has been built around us in the meantime. So although it's a beautiful historic site, it has very little room for expansion. And so just in terms of our daily activities, there was an urgent need to create extra space for the college.
I always felt that I was in the debt of Exeter College. It's at Exeter that I really learned to think. And I wanted to find a way of expressing my support. I didn't start out with the idea of making a significant contribution to this building, but as the plans for the building developed, it seemed to me to be a very important addition to Exeter. The vision was a very interesting one. It was to create something which was a bit of a hearth for learning, a place where people could feel at home, could feel inspired, could feel stimulated, and at the same time feel comfortable.
And I was about halfway into my rectorship when we discovered that Ruskin College was selling this site. Worcester College put in a bid for it. We put in a bid for it. But it was a terrifying decision. I remember how scary it was. And then we owned it, and it was a wreck, and we then had to decide what to do with it. And we had no idea if our donors would support us, but they did, amazingly. And I look round it, and now I see what this has brought us.
We call it a third quadrangle. There are two quadrangles on the Turl Street site because it includes all the different activities that an Oxford college has. So in addition to sleeping space, Cohen Quad provides a cafe. There are a variety of teaching rooms. There's an auditorium that will be extremely useful for musical and dramatic performances and for lectures. There's a wonderful learning commons for all sorts of informal interaction by all the different categories of people in the college: fellows, lecturers, graduate students, undergraduates, staff, alumni, mixing together, which is something we've never had before. And we're also moving to Cohen Quad our archives and our rare books. And that's a nice symbol of the way in which Cohen Quad is going to be closely linked in operation to the historic site on Turl Street.
My first ever recollection of this project is an email from my previous boss with a picture of Ruskin College and a for sale sign, and just said, "What do you think of this?" Now, if I could turn back the hands of time, what my answer would be, who knows? What we had were 4 buildings, 76 rooms, 20 plus staircases, a completely inaccessible site. It had been the home of Ruskin since 1913, and the buildings have been added to. So there was a 1936, a 1960s building, and an 80s building. All of them complex, tired, in need of updating, and on a very challenging site. It had potential, it was no doubt it had potential, but to really deliver and get benefit from this building, it was quite obvious that we needed to do some major intervention. The competition came about really because we realised this was a significant project. We needed assistance with it, and we wanted a broad brush range of architects who could give us designs, ideas and concepts which were wide-reaching and the sort of non-typical Oxbridge College. They started with a long list of 25 architects that we could actually go out to discuss, and we had a very long committee meeting and trying to whittle down 25. We left that meeting with 40, so we had a quick emergency meeting and then finally got the 40 back down to a 5.
Before we even kicked off our architectural competition, a group of fellows visited a great many buildings around the country. We were clear that we wanted natural light everywhere, and insofar as possible we wanted ventilation to be provided through windows that would open rather than being mechanically powered through the building. And when we identified Alison Brooks as our preferred architect with this plan, which is pretty much the original concept that she enticed us with, the building itself lives up to all of those expectations.
There is the standard sort of needs list, so we needed 90 student rooms, we needed teaching rooms, we needed accessible spaces. In every way we wanted to create almost a new college environment. Now the need also asked for a space for social encounters and learning experiences, and the ABA competition entry grasped that straight away, and so the Learning Commons was always the sort of crux of the design, centred around the heart of the building, sort of this reinterpretation of a 21st century quadrangle where you have these social encounters and ability to learn and grow together.
When we initially came to the project, our first port of call was obviously the Turl Street Quad, what the format of the historic quad was and is, and how we could draw on that amazing sort of architectural and cultural artifact as a source of inspiration and reference. So we visited the site, spent time in Oxford, and of course spent time looking at the Ruskin College site as it was at the time. We do a lot of other kinds of research around the sort of literature and publications and into the history of the alumni. And in a way, all of these inputs start to form a kind of inspirational stew. Our key approaches to the building in sort of rethinking the way collegiate quadrangles work was to conceive of every space in the building as a space of gathering. So instead of thinking that, well, rooms are where people gather and corridors are how you get from A to B, that every foyer space or cloister or corridor would be generous enough and special enough that it would be a place where people would be happy, or students would be happy to stop and sit around and gather and exchange ideas. I think also the family kitchens are a really important part of that, which was Frances Cairncross's idea, and a wonderful one, that students would have a place sort of between the Learning Commons and their room, a sort of smaller, more intimate space which would allow them to entertain friends or just share mealtime, which is such an important part of any kind of communality.
The difficult part of a project like this is it was a competition where you have a final finished design and then you basically have to then resell it back to the planners from concept going forward. Halfway through planning, the oldest part of the building, which is the two facades you can still see, were listed. So English Heritage made it Grade 2 listed. So that kind of changed the whole planning process.
The weekend we found out it was going to be listed caused, a lot of extra hours at work. It became quite a heated topic for a long time in the college because of the complexity. In fact, it was one of two buildings that the City Council voted on to list the building, as it were, ours and the council building, and unfortunately ours lost. So we were forced into having to really use a lot of creativity to try and make this building work in the way it's doing, integrating the original facade. The entire 1913 block was actually listed, but through negotiation with the council and the planners, we were able to just keep the retained facade, the two elements there. Plus or 2 millimeters in movement is okay, but on a windy day you can get +3, +4, and actually the alarm bells ring and you think, uh-oh, all the work stop on site. There was a few scary days during the winter process actually when that happened, but thankfully when the concrete frame was tied back into the building, it actually hadn't moved by more than 1 millimeter, so it was fantastic.
At certain points we've had up to 200 contractors on site, so how you then manage that with cranes and hoists. So yeah, it's been quite a compact area to work within.
We were very interested in transforming and kind of layering the new and the old within the context of that listed facade. And so our proposal to extend the roof form and create this new voluminous shimmering roof was probably the most difficult idea or concept that we had to persuade various stakeholders would be appropriate and relevant, and a really refreshing example of contemporary architecture.
When I first saw it, I was really happy that we were kind of the people to break in Cohen Quad, as it were, because it just really looked fancy. And yeah, as a student, having lived out, we kind of appreciate fancy living.
I was just absolutely amazed that this has been built right at the centre of Oxford, and just how big the accommodation was and how good quality everything seemed. I was absolutely amazed.
Just the space, the openness and the natural light that comes into this building just makes it such a nice place to work.
Yes, I'm really pleased with the result. I think it's exceeded our expectations, even though we model in 3D and we use sort of every technique possible to understand the different elements and aspects of our design. There are some things that have really sort of flowered through being built, and I think the proportions of the space, the ground floor spaces, the very high ceilings, they are wonderful and feel better and more lofty than even we imagined.
The best moment for me recently, after we were able to let students take occupation of it, was one evening as I was coming up through the South Cloister. I spotted a young chap coming into the building carrying his shopping in a Sainsbury's shopping bag, and I thought, yes, that tells us that people have established themselves here and have a sense of belonging in the place because they're making it their home, and he was obviously preparing to cook his dinner. So that's tremendous, that's what we wanted.
As you come up the street, the building is both, at the same time, I think, architecturally interesting, but also a good neighbour. I think it's really achieved that combination, which is unusual.
As I came into the building this morning and walked down the corridor of those wooden arches, seeing it for the first time and seeing it with the light sending the shadows of the moving leaves of the trees along the wall dancing across the arches, I thought, this is really beautiful. I think this is a building that Oxford will be proud of, and proud of for a very long time.
I think what Alison has translated here is just unique. Because if you can imagine other schemes where you've got a building which comprises a number of rectangular and square rooms, here you have a building which is open to the world. It has these soaring arches. These things are inspiring. And I have no doubt that one would be a lot more innovative in an environment like this than you would be if you were in the former type of building.
It's one of the projects that you just can't put down at 5 o'clock in the evening. It deserved more than that. That's certainly what we gave. It's amazingly gratifying to be at the end of it, and I will be proud of it for years to come.
It's really a wonderful feeling to be contributing to the Oxford skyline, this the famous phrase, the dreaming spires of Oxford. We haven't got spires, but I think the form and the material of our roof, of the quad, is somehow will be another sort of intriguing, slightly mysterious aspect of the Oxford skyline.
It's going to give us the chance as a college at Exeter to improve everything that we do, so that in the years to come, Exeter is going to emerge as an even more excellent academic community and an even more supportive family than it is now.
The donors who made this possible did a phenomenal job, because not only have they given Exeter something which the college will be proud of for a very long time, but they have also been able to make the lives of the college's students, future generations of students, better than it would otherwise be. Better in the sense that they have a wonderful building to live in, but better also in the sense that they're not paying money to Oxford landlords for more accommodation than they need. Of all the people I'm grateful to, Sir Ronald Cohen is right at the top of the list. Not just for his enormous generosity in making this building possible, but also for mentoring me and encouraging me at the times when I was thinking the college really has taken on more than it can cope with. It was he who said, no, we can do this, don't worry, it'll come right.
I hope the experience will be a very happy one, and not just for those who are in residence here, but all the students of Exeter. I think it's breathtaking.